Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Good evening, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. I also hope you're warm, settled in, and ready for what will be a very interesting story about preparing to go into outer space. This evening, we're going to talk about the beginning of the abbreviated astronaut training some of my crew had to go through in order to be fit for space duty. There was an early complication with one crew member, and I'll tell you how things progressed after that. But like I said before, my spacecraft, the Journeyman, did have artificial gravity, so we were able to truncate some of the more space-centric training, and if anything did go wrong, well, we had enough fully trained astronauts on board that we should be able to handle anything that came up unexpectedly. But you never know when you're on an adventure, especially in space. Anything can happen, and usually does, and I will tell you all about the training in a moment. But first, I need to tell you about a few other things. I forgot to mention this last time, but I wanted to say that I hoped you enjoyed the crossover episode with Professor Scooter. We did something new and had a guest speaker over to the lab, and it's always nice to try new things. Anyway, like I said, I hope you enjoyed it and followed up and familiarized yourself with some of his original scientific research. It can be quite fascinating. One thing Professor Scooter didn't mention is that he's an avid hang glider, and while he's tried to get me to join him on numerous occasions, he won't let me use my customized power glider, as he is a purist and says it defeats the purpose, so our recreational outing had reached an impasse. We eventually compromised, and I customized my power glider with a solar-powered eco engine, which was virtually silent and unobtrusive. Professor Scooter smiled and shook his head playfully and said that would be acceptable and was a creative compromise. But then it started raining and we had to reschedule anyway. Still, I look forward to it. Anyway, I'd also like to nudge you to rate the show with a bunch of stars. Reviews are great too, but ratings with stars will awaken the algorithm. So please rate the show and add some stars. Adding a review is fantastic too. It's always nice to read pleasant things about what we're doing over here. And of course, don't forget to tell your friends directly about the show and post about the show wherever you post about things. Thank you, adventurers. Now, as I always mention, there is the White Cat Adventurers Club, although we do have a Science and Adventure Helper donation link on the homepage too. So all you have to do is go to whitecatentertainment.com and click Donate if you just want to do a one-time donation to help the show. If you just want to donate a little bit more one time or once a year or however you wish to do it, it is all up to you. Every bit of science and adventure help, well, helps. But if you do want more content, there is the White Cat Adventurers Club. You get sometimes early access, you do get ad-free listening to the shows and an exclusive look at my irregular journal. Now, science and exploring is expensive, and your support helps make it happen. And support starts at just $5 a month, and you could go up from there with some other bonuses like t-shirts and graphic novels, all sorts of interesting things that you may enjoy. So just go to patreon.com/whitecatentertainment and enjoy the access your way. All right, let's get back to the story. Now, NASA was kind enough to arrange all of our transportation to and from Houston, Texas, and we departed Los Angeles within 24 hours of finalizing the crew roster. Not everyone had to come, of course, as some were already astronauts and were using the time efficiently to help prepare the journeyman for takeoff. Like I said, our time was limited, so we needed to maximize every moment. Now, I would of course be bringing Dolores, our mercenary/security officer, of course. She also happened to be in a relationship with Bradley, my assistant. While I was happy for them both, what concerned me was that she had astrophobia, and I was hoping that wouldn't be a problem. Bradley would also be coming with me and participating, mostly as a refresher course, as he had already been in space. And honestly, that's one of the first things we do when I'm training a new assistant, as it lets me know where they're at, both in the scientific and adventuring sense. It's a great litmus test, space travel, let me tell you. But I also think Bradley was overjoyed to be able to support Dolores more than anything, and she admitted she was a little anxious about the training. But as usual, it didn't show, as the casual demeanor she always presented never seemed to slip. It was impressive. I told her we weren't on the mission yet, and it was okay to be a little anxious about astronaut training and space travel. She smiled and relaxed a bit for real, and I could tell she appreciated the support. I believed in her, and I didn't think we'd have any issues. Beverly, our space chef, I was the most concerned with. She said she was prone to motion sickness, just not on water, so it never came up as an oceanic chef. However, amusement park rides and airplanes would sometimes get her sick, just not the ocean, so it was quite unusual. I would have to see how she responded to the training. Stephen, not Steve, our communications and linguistics officer, would also be joining us. And apparently he loved roller coasters and had his own YouTube channel celebrating all of his experiences on them. So I was pretty confident he would have no trouble with the training, at least with the G-force training in any case. Aaron, our medic, was an experienced Air Force medic already, and he also had an eye patch. He said he would bring his special training eye patch to NASA, whatever that meant. But his experience and resume spoke for itself, so if there were a few quirks regarding multiple eye patches for various occasions, then so be it. Barry, our flight commander, and Kara, our flight engineer, would be staying behind and working on prepping the journeyman. Janet, the NASA mission specialist, would meet us in Houston and wanted to supervise the newest cadets, so to speak. After a bit of quick packing, we were soon on our way to NASA for the abbreviated astronaut training. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about NASA. The NASA Astronaut Corps is a unit of the United States National Aeronautics and Space Administration that selects, trains, and provides astronauts as crew members for U.S. and international space missions. It is based at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The first U.S. astronaut candidates were selected by NASA in 1959 for its Project Mercury, with the objective of orbiting astronauts around the Earth in single-man capsules. The military services were asked to provide a list of military test pilots who met specific qualifications. After stringent screening, NASA announced its selection of the Mercury 7 as its first astronauts. Since then, NASA has selected 22 more groups of astronauts, opening the Corps to civilians, scientists, doctors, engineers, and school teachers. As of the 2009 astronaut class, 61% of the astronauts selected by NASA have come from military service. NASA selects candidates from a diverse pool of applicants with a wide variety of backgrounds. From the thousands of applications received, only a few are chosen for the intensive astronaut candidate training program. Including the original 7, 339 candidates have been selected to date. Now, those are just the ones you know about. There are many candidates and missions that are, well, how do they put it, off the books. My son, Patrick, has done a number of those, and that's one of the reasons NASA came to me when one went missing. There were other reasons, of course, like how I could get there the fastest since NASA's deep space missions were already all in, well, deep space. And of course, because it was my son on that Mars mission, NASA judged very correctly that I would not say no. The Astronaut Corps is based at the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston, although members may be assigned to other locations based on mission requirements, but honestly, it's mostly Houston. That's where the hub is and where most of the training resources are, like most of the simulators. And the mock Mars Underground training facility is located there as well. Okay, well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Anyway, the Chief of the Astronaut Office is the most senior leadership position for active astronauts in the Corps. The Chief Astronaut serves as head of the Corps and is the principal advisor to the NASA Administrator on astronaut training and operations. The first Chief Astronaut was Deke Slayton, appointed in 1962. Now, there are no age restrictions for the NASA Astronaut Corps. Astronaut candidates have ranged between the ages of 26 and 46, with the average age being 34. Now, it's interesting that they say there are no age restrictions, but that is still only a 20-year window that they usually look at. But there have been instances of older and younger astronauts. They just don't seem to get advertised as much. Candidates must have a master's degree from an accredited institution in engineering, biological science, physical science, or mathematics. The degree must be followed by at least 2 to 3 years of related, progressively responsible, professional experience, or graduate work or studies, or at least 1,000 hours of pilot-in-command time in jet aircraft. An advanced degree is desirable and may be substituted for experience, such as a doctoral degree, which counts as the 2 years' experience. Teaching experience, including experience at the K through 12 levels, is considered to be qualifying experience. Sure, but to be honest, while teaching K through 12 is considered qualifying experience and not easy by any stretch of the imagination, NASA is still going to be looking at pilots, mathematicians, astrophysicists, and star-based colony planners first, before high school chemistry teachers. I mean, do you remember your high school chemistry teacher? Some are great and generous with their knowledge and time. However, let's be honest, others act like they just know everything and teach high school classes arrogantly and are often confidently under the fallacy that they are doing everyone a favor. That's not someone you want on a space mission. Anyway, regardless of their backgrounds, all candidates must normally have the ability to pass the NASA long-duration spaceflight physical. But for us, this would be graded on a curve for my crew, as there was a time consideration during this abbreviated training. Normally, the NASA long-duration spaceflight physical will include the following specific requirements. Distant and near visual acuity must be correctable to 20/20, each eye separately, but corrective lenses such as glasses are allowed. The refractive surgical procedures of the eye, such as LASIK, are allowed, providing at least 1 year has passed since the date of the procedure with no permanent adverse after effects. Blood pressure not to exceed 140/90, measured in a sitting position. Standing height between 62 and 75 inches. Basically, you need to be able to fit in small spaces and, of course, not get claustrophobic. The term astronaut candidate, informally ASCAN, not the best abbreviation, refers to individuals who have been selected by NASA as candidates for the NASA Astronaut Corps and are currently undergoing a candidacy training program at the Johnson Space Center. The most recent class of astronaut candidates was selected in 2021. Now, my crew would begin training, and not a moment too soon. The private flight to NASA was uneventful and, in fact, quite pleasant. Most of the crew hadn't flown on a government jet before, and there were definitely some perks like free food, sodas, and occasional glances at top-secret documents someone forgot to put away. We settled into the NASA corporate housing that was prepared for us. The training would begin first thing in the morning. Despite it being shorter, it would not be easy. I tried to brief the crew on the way, but the truth is, no matter how much I described the training, they would have to experience it for themselves. Now, astronaut training describes the complex process of preparing astronauts in regions around the world for their space missions before, during, and after the flight, which includes medical tests, physical training, extravehicular activity, or EVA, training, procedure training, rehabilitation process, as well as training on experiments they will accomplish during their stay in space. Virtual and physical training facilities have been integrated to familiarize astronauts with the conditions they will encounter during all phases of flight and prepare astronauts for a microgravity environment. Special considerations must be made during training to ensure a safe and successful mission, which is why the Apollo astronauts receive training for geology fieldwork on the lunar surface and why research is being conducted on best practices for future extended missions, such as the trip to Mars. Again, that's the forward-facing PR copy. NASA has already been there multiple times, and so have I. Anyway, the selection and training of astronauts ensure the crew members are qualified for space missions. The training is categorized into 5 objectives to train the astronauts on the general and specific aspects: basic training, advanced training, mission-specific training, onboard training, and proficiency maintenance training. The trainees must learn medicine, language, robotics, piloting, space system engineering, the organization of space systems, and of course the acronyms in aerospace engineering during the basic training. But let's be clear, no one washes out of space camp because they forgot a few acronyms. Except for Professor Salkind, but I think she did it on purpose as she was having second thoughts about the whole experience. Now, while it's not commonly known, 60 to 80% of the astronauts will experience space motion sickness. And this is why I was hopeful Beverly would still be able to come with us. The astronaut candidates are expected to overcome the sickness, but it's a common misconception that no astronaut ever gets space sick. They do. They just manage it and overcome it. That's the key. During the advanced training and the mission-specific training, astronauts will learn about the operation of specific systems and skills required associated with their assigned positions on a space mission. The mission-specific training typically requires 18 months to complete for Space Shuttle and International Space Station crews. Oh, that sounds about right. We had 2 weeks, so like I said, it would be more highlights than anything. Now, it is important to ensure the astronauts' well-being, physical and mental health prior, during, and after the mission period. Proficiency maintenance aims to help the crew members to maintain a minimum level of performance, including topics such as extravehicular activity, robotics, language, driving, and flight training. Anyway, that's the overview. Training would begin in the morning, and I wanted to get a little sleep before then. Janet, the mission specialist, and I would be monitoring the entire process. In fact, Janet invited me to an early breakfast in the NASA cafeteria to go over a few things. I accepted and was ready to turn in for the night. I read over some of the NASA training protocols before turning in to refresh my memory on a few things, and Janet had provided specific information on what the truncated training would look like, and what concerned me was that there was a lot of red ink over the timelines. Originally, it was supposed to be 6 weeks of training, which is still very short, of course. Then it was down to 4, then all the way down to 2, with a question mark next to it. Anyway, I went to sleep dreaming of space and centrifuges, which is a common NASA dream when you're on campus, I'm told. The next morning, the bright Texas sun shone through my window and comfortably warmed my room. I was well rested and felt good, optimistic, and hopeful. We would get through the training, and I would find the missing Mars mission along with my son. I was ready for whatever the day may bring. I met Janet in the NASA cafeteria, and honestly, the food was quite good. I had waffles in the shape of space shuttles, which I found entertaining and delicious. As we ate, Janet took a deep breath and gave me the old government line about how things were classified and that she'd be able to tell me more about the mission on the way. But she did want me to know that she would be here for support throughout the entire astronaut training. In other words, nothing I wasn't expecting, but I did appreciate that she was extra polite about everything. She took another deep breath and said we needed to discuss the timeline. Her bosses really wanted to, quote, get things going, and asked if I thought we could be ready in 1 week. I said that was unlikely, as there were a few questions about if everyone was even fit for space duty. Janet said she understood and said she had pushed back on her superiors, but wanted to get my opinion. My opinion was that I agreed with her, the mission specialist. As much as I wanted to get going as soon as possible, I felt we needed the full 2 weeks for the training, which, all things considered, like I said before, was still incredibly short. Even if the journeyman did have artificial gravity, I had to be sure, as did she, that we didn't rush the training and make sure everyone could handle space and, of course, the mission. Now, when I mentioned the mission, that's when Janet looked at me cryptically and then asked me about the crew. She added that even if they did pass all of the astronaut training, would they still be able to handle the mission, including anything unexpected and things that may challenge conventional wisdom about Mars. I knew what she was referring to, of course, but we couldn't openly discuss it at the NASA cafeteria. I assured her I had complete confidence in everyone when it came to the mission. My crew had already seen many unusual things, not just in space. They could handle it. Janet smiled and relaxed a bit. That was clearly the answer she was looking for. Anyway, we finished our waffles, and soon it was time for the training to begin. The first training module would focus on launch and landing. I mean, first things first, of course. Now, the effects of launching and landing has various effects on astronauts, with the most significant effects that occur being, of course, space motion sickness, orthostatic intolerance, and cardiovascular events. Space motion sickness is an event that can occur within minutes of being in changing gravity environments, like for instance the 1G on Earth prior to launch to more than 1G during launch, and then from microgravity in space to hypergravity during re-entry, and again to 1G after landing. The symptoms range from mild to severe, from drowsiness to nausea. As I said before, about 3/4 of astronauts experience space motion sickness, which effects rarely exceed 2 days. There is a risk for post-flight motion sickness, however, this is only significant during long-duration space missions. Post-flight, following exposure to microgravity, the vestibular system, located in the inner ear, is disrupted because of the microgravity-induced unresponsiveness of the otoliths, which are small calcareous concretions that sense body postures and are responsible for ensuring proper balance. In most cases, this leads to some post-flight postural illusions. I'll confess I had one of these myself on my first trip to space. I had a classic one where it looked like the moon was indeed made out of green cheese, and a giant space mouse was eating it. Granted, it was an illusion, but it felt so real that I checked my moon readings just to be sure. Cardiovascular events represent important factors during the 3 phases of a space mission. In other words, you need a healthy heart to go to space. Totally understandable. So the first training module was a big one. This was where the centrifuges were used. We needed to make sure everyone on the crew could handle various G-forces. You see, the human body has different tolerances for G-forces depending on the acceleration direction. Humans can withstand a positive acceleration forward at higher G-forces, then they can withstand a positive acceleration upwards. This is because when the body accelerates up at such high rates, the blood rushes from the brain, which causes loss of vision. A further increase in G-forces will cause G-lock, where consciousness is lost. This is doubly dangerous because, on recovery as G is reduced, a period of several seconds of disorientation occurs, during which the spacecraft would most likely require some attention. Now, interestingly, dreams are reported to follow G-lock, which are often brief and vivid. You always remember your first G-lock dream. Anyway, the G thresholds at which these effects occur depend on the training, age, and fitness of the individual. An untrained individual, not used to the G-straining maneuver, can black out between 4 and 6 Gs, particularly if this is pulled suddenly. Roller coasters typically do not expose the occupants to much more than about 3G. A trained, fit individual wearing a G-suit can, with some difficulty, sustain up to 9 Gs without loss of consciousness. Now, interestingly, G-force manageability can also be directional. The human body is considerably more able to survive G-forces that are perpendicular to the spine. This is not true in 0G when you strafe up. That is an eyeballs down maneuver, which is the same force as a blackout where blood rushes to the feet, and this force is parallel to the spine. In general, when the G-force pushes the body forwards, colloquially known as eyeballs in, a much higher tolerance is shown than when G-force is pushing the body backwards, eyeballs out, since blood vessels in the retina appear more sensitive to that direction. The NASA centrifuge training began and would be very telling to see who could handle things related to launch and landing. We would have the results very quickly, and I'm happy to say most of the crew performed wonderfully. Dolores and Bradley requested a 2-seat centrifuge, which NASA had for couples training, and Stephen, not Steve, the linguistics expert, also performed very well. Aaron, our eye patch-wearing medic, did indeed change into a training eye patch, or so he said. I'll be honest, I didn't notice the difference. And when he got out of the centrifuge, he wasn't even dizzy. He was ex-Air Force, but even so, it looked like he took a nap inside the centrifuge and just woke up and looked well-rested when it was over. Unfortunately, this is also where we had our first problem. Beverly, our oceanic chef, did not do well on the centrifuge. Let's just say she didn't do well and leave it at that. When she recovered, she took me aside and reluctantly informed me that she could not go on the mission with us. Janet had already removed her from the crew roster after the report from the centrifuge cleaning crew, but Beverly didn't need an official report. She knew it wasn't going to work out. It turns out that wasn't the only reason Beverly took me aside to let me know. Beverly had also made an incredibly considerate gesture. She had contacted Jillian, her one-time oceanic chef rival, and told her about the situation. I thought about there being some government-classified protocols that were probably being violated, but I kept quiet as I wanted to see where this was going. Beverly had asked Jillian to replace her on this mission, and she had agreed. Now, not too long ago, this scenario would never have happened, she added. They hadn't been on speaking terms in a long time, despite being chef college friends. Their rivalry had taken the place of their friendship, but thanks to my help, they had reconciled after the Great Alternative Universe Oceanic Chef Bake-Off. They both wanted to return the favor. Plus, it would be a swap. Beverly would join Professor Felice's crew, who were still doing storm energy harvesting experiments off the coast of Norway, but without the Maelstrom wormhole generator for now. Sure, it would be a bit cold, but Beverly didn't mind. Before I could get a word in edgewise, Beverly made it clear that her and Jillian were not going to take no for an answer. They owed me, and Jillian would be here at NASA by tomorrow. I said I would still have to clear it with Janet, our mission specialist, and Beverly said she'd already done so, as Jillian had a friend high up in NASA who had already made a few phone calls. I was quite impressed by their consideration and initiative, but also because they seemed to accomplish this rather large amount of logistical coordination in a remarkably short amount of time. But I suppose if you're constantly managing ingredients, cooking temperatures, and multiple dishes for a ship full of hungry crewmen, you were already quite detail-oriented to begin with. Beverly also added that Jillian was perpetually motion sickness-free, even on stormy seas. She had an iron constitution and was even an amusement park ride beta tester in her spare time. She was apparently so immune to motion sickness, they would often use her as the control group, even on the most head-spinning rides. This was promising. But the truth was, this wasn't a great start. On the first day of training, we had lost a crew member. She was replaced, but Jillian still had to pass the launch and landing training module, but I was confident she would. But she would also be a day behind. You know, there are some days you just have to roll with the punches and keep your science hat on straight. We would manage these difficulties and get into space on schedule. We had all hands on deck and everything was full speed ahead. But there would not be room for any more large complications, so I was hoping anything else that came up would be a bit more manageable. And I will tell you all about how the rest of the training went next time. But before I end this evening's story, I want to talk to you about something. You've always heard the advice, know your limitations. Now, is that really great advice? Here's what's interesting. It takes a lot of effort to put ego aside and do just that. But the truth is, that's only the first step. Often, the more stubborn among us, myself included sometimes, know our limitations. We just don't acknowledge them. We think they aren't correct, or we just haven't tried hard enough, or we just continue to make excuses on why something didn't work, and that failure is always in our effort or in our judgment. And I'm here to tell you, give yourself a break. Put the ego aside and acknowledge your limitations without guilt or shame. Now, here's the interesting thing that happens when you do that. Once you acknowledge your limitations, you can actually go further. I know it sounds like they are diametrically opposed, but they are not. They are in parallel. When you acknowledge your limitations, you are free to ask for help. And that's when you can get further than you can on your own. But if you're in denial, well, then you just sort of go in circles. And that's exactly what happened to Professor Merriweather, a mathematician who specialized in circles. She was convinced pi was 3.15 and started designing a biosphere around her new discovery. She would not let anyone check her work or allow peer review. The biosphere, unsurprisingly, collapsed through an insufficient foundation. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But she wasted a lot of a billionaire's social media money, and he was not happy. She finally admitted her mistake and acknowledged that she may not be an expert on pi, and in turn, livable biospheres. But I remember her saying to me later, after the lawsuits, that it was an absolutely liberating feeling to know and acknowledge that sometimes you don't know everything and that you need help. Professor Merriweather is now working only with squares and rectangles now, and seems much happier. So don't just know your limitations, acknowledge them. And in doing so, you may just save yourself a lot of time and $1 billion of someone else's money. Good night, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.